No, I would not marry my cousin because personally that's just weird, and I don't know, I can't go from Bhai to like John in like days. I don't know, it's just, I don't know how people do it, but there's other reasons that people might not want to because of genetic deformities, but that only, it's not always the case. So like my nana nani, they were cousins and mashallah all their kids are healthy.
यार अगर मेरी ऑनेस्ट ओपिनियन लेते हो ना तो हमें कज़न मैरिजेस बिल्कुल नहीं करनी चाहिए, क्योंकि यार हकीकत यह है कि जेनेटिक डिफॉर्मिटीज़ हो जाती हैं बच्चों में। और लाइक मेरी फैमिली में खुद ये एक बार हुआ है, लाइक नॉट माई ओन पर्सनल फैमिली, लेकिन हमारी एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली में 2-3 केसेस ना हो चुके हैं कज़न मैरिजेस के साथ। एंड ये अब थोड़ा बैड सीन होना शुरू हो गया, लोगों को अवेयरनेस आनी शुरू हो गई है, लेकिन यार नुकसान बहुत ज़्यादा है, बेनिफिट्स कम है।
Cousin marriages. Let's see. Well, my opinion is gonna be, please don't marry a cousin. There are so many fish in the sea for you to marry. Don't be lazy. And then the science part. You don't want your genes to mix up and your chromosomes getting confused and your child getting the wrong end of the stick. So basically, because of you marrying your cousin, your child gets, all the sicknesses.
No, I would not marry my cousin because, well, for one, I don't have any cousins my age, and I don't really want, kids with 3 legs and 4 eyes. Actually, that would be kind of interesting. I might have to reconsider that one.
These were just a few opinions which I gathered from some of our previous podcast guests. Maha from Canada, Ammaz from Islamabad, Noor from Karachi, and Saf from London. This episode is about cousin marriages, and our main guest for this episode is Zara Hafiz. Zara is a digital marketer, a writer, volunteer for various humanitarian causes. She does a lot of on-the-field work, and she does many other things, actually. She's quite involved. Zara also writes articles for the Express Tribune, and she was actually invited for this podcast to talk about an article that she wrote for the Tribune on cousin marriages a few years ago. She had done extensive research in preparation for this article, and today she will share the result of that research. She also relates back to her research with quite a few personal stories to complete her perspective. We tackle cousin marriage from 3 different angles. 1, the facts, meaning the statistics. 2, the culture, meaning Pakistanis and what they have to say about it. And 3, the religion, which is Islam in this case, the predominant religion in Pakistan. Throughout this discussion, we also tap into other topics like divorce, honor killings, and various other cultural issues. So to start off, Zara went right in and started giving me the background of what led her to write this cousin marriage article for the Tribune. You can find this article online. I'll share a link for it in the podcast episode description on our website. Here's Zara.
We'll just keep the journalistic side, the education side, and the marketing side, and especially the humanitarian side, because that is where this stemmed from, this cousin marriages topic.
Really?
I'm working with James Caan Foundation, which is based in UK, the business entrepreneur, James Caan. So I'm working with him. This is back in the day, like how they say this Instagram influencer and Twitter influencer, which is this term that is just popping up now. I just don't understand that now, because back in 2010, when floods hit Pakistan really, really badly, I remember I had to go all the way to Charsadda. And this is when I was about probably 25 or 26. I left home, I left Lahore, and in that cold, in that freezing cold, I went ahead and we had to build villages. And I was in direct contact with Queen Noor, Arjun Rampal, Salman Khan.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, and they're all on my Twitter. They're actually there. All the conversations that have taken place is right there in front of people. And at that time, this is like what now, 8 years ago? To 2019 mein enter hum kar rahe, so like 9 years ago. So I think I should be an influencer also now.
Yeah, you probably more than you think. Yeah, I didn't know that actually, that you were also so involved with the humanitarian efforts.
No, that we are even on ground. For example, on the on Easter 2015, we had a bomb blast in Iqbal Park in Lahore. and I was on ground picking up
Oh, wow.
kids who were burnt up, their limbs were torn apart. And at that moment, I'm the sort of person who, in that moment, my emotions just sort of switch off. I don't know, it's
Mhm.
basic training or whatever you want to call it. At that time, it's more solution oriented than, cribbing and crying and all of that. So I remember going to Mayo Hospital, Jinnah Hospital, Children's Hospital, Service Hospital, 3 days in a row. And it was tormenting at the same time.
Mhm.
Obviously, being very careful. You need to be very careful with these patients. We needed prosthetic limbs, which we didn't have in Pakistan, and so we had a couple of people, and we were just a couple of people. We were not associated with a particular NGO. So Muniba Mazari was with me, Nadia Jamil was with me, Jibran Nasser was with me, and I chose up a large trust under Dr. Talha Ravan to just work with him, because he did seem to be, a little more well-informed. Plus, he was a doctor himself. And we ended up getting prosthetic limbs from the United States all the way to Pakistan free of cost, only to
Whoa.
find out that those limbs were then going to be, put in storage in Jinnah Hospital. So we made it a point that they were, given to the patients for free. So that
Wow.
was done. And there are like so many things happening. Plus, recently with this Asia baby thing that happened, very few people know that we blame Khadim Rizvi, we blamed everybody politically. Yes, we've done that. But the amount of damage done to people, not only personally, their properties, but also people died.
Yeah.
People suffered. People lost their kids. People, so much happened on ground, on field, and we were there, right there. And when the Chaman blast took place, again, we flew from Lahore. I left all my work, everything, only to be there. And I think that's very therapeutic. It's not because I'm gaining fame or anything. It's just so therapeutic being, human.
Yeah.
You're human. I say this to my students, and I say this to everybody, that you're human first. And be it, your adults, you don't let anybody abuse authority. They can't abuse their authority just because they're adults or they know better than you, or you think that they know better than you, because you might know something that is, more pivotal and more important. And these things matter. So yes, with this digital era, getting these kids involved in, empathizing. Simple thing as empathy is not there. Compassion and empathy. And if you can't say a kind word, just shut up and don't say anything at all. It's something which is not there. So that's where mental health issues come in. And I'm also a mental health counselor and a career counselor at a reputed institution. So that too. So I mean, I'm dealing with all walks of life, with impressionable ages.
Right.
Is it tough?
We live in a weird time right now where, like, everything that you see, everything that your eye sees, it's almost like in our minds, it has to be captured on phone. So everybody has their phones out, cameras open, and they're, shooting everything that they see. Otherwise, it's almost like you never saw it in the first place if you don't share it with your social networks.
Yes.
Yet there's not enough of, I think, people like you who I can imagine the fact that you're able to contribute to actual work that has to be done after such crises and stuff, right? That experience is indispensable, I would say.
Yes, it is. And I mean, everything is a show right now. And I don't want to sound judgmental. I really don't want to sound judgmental, but it's on my face. So I can't, negate the fact that everything is a show. There would be a protest going on, and there would be literally 10 people in that protest. But the way the media is portraying that, it'll show you 10,000 people.
Really?
I've been in those protests, and I'm like, okay, we've got no coverage. And then I'm seeing that on television, and I'm like, oh, there's so many of us.
Wow. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that happens there too.
Oh,
यहाँ
it
पे भी
happens
होता है कभी-कभी.
everywhere.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, the media does, it's really good at making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, that is why having a degree in media communication and journalism, all these media outlets, when they reach out to me, they're like, Zara, why don't you do this? Zara, why don't you do that? And I'm like, this is against my own value and ethics and belief systems, they might not stem from my parents or religion or whatever. It's my own personal inner core, thinking. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to negate what I believe in. I mean, that's identity crisis altogether. So I can't go through that. I'm sorry. I can't put myself through that kind of stuff. So yeah.
That makes sense. So then with all this humanitarian work going on, what made you, this article that you wrote on cousin marriage on Tribune was written in 2014. So it's been about 4 years now. What made you kind of get interested in that topic? What led you to that?
Actually, so I was noticing since I'm doing this, so I'm also working with UNICEF under the bandwagon of A Promise for Children. Okay, and we come across children from all walks of life, from all different areas in the world. And we do see these disabilities, if you want to call them, or we see these, people going through, physical deformities, if you want to say that. I mean, I wouldn't really say physical deformities, but there's so much going on. And the question then arises, why? I understand if something like that is happening, let's say in Somalia or Ethiopia, or, where kids are suffering from hunger,
malnutrition,
there is malnutrition, and there's no absolute end to that. But I don't understand why it is happening in places like Pakistan, where agriculture is a major part of our existence. And I'm talking about rural areas. I'm not even talking about cosmopolitan or metropolitan cities like Islamabad, Karachi, and Lahore. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about rural areas at the moment. And I've been to Miawali, Sargodha, Risalpur, Nashara. Where else? My God, I've gone to very remote, even Shortcourt. But no, I did notice that in rural areas, there is so much of lack of education. But when we say education, I am not saying curriculum-based, book studies or schools or madrasas or whatever you want to call it. Not that. Because whenever we coin the term madrasas, the first thing that comes into our mind is a religious, something related to religion.
Right.
But madrasas actually are built to teach. And back in our, maybe back in our parents' era, वो एक तख्त होता था जिसपे उर्दू की लिखाई की जाती थी. If you see their writing उर्दू
I've
की,
seen that.
Yeah, it's like nearly calligraphic,
It is.
And
Yeah.
And when we look at ours, you're like, you can't eat a door.
No, it's very true. Yeah.
Okay, so you're coming to your question. What prompted me to really get into cousin marriages was, call it fury. One was fury. One reason was fury, and I'll come to that. It was a very personal fury. And the second one was obviously seeing firsthand certain issues where cousin marriages were the reason for these disabilities that we're seeing in children. And I have, working with children very closely with my humanitarian work, I think that when two people get married, even if they're not cousins, okay, marriage is an institution, and it's a beautiful institution. It is just how you perceive it. It's all about perception, right?
Yeah,
so as I was listening to your earlier podcast, one of the girls even said that, and I really agree with her on that you need to have a relationship with your in-laws, which is separate to that of that relationship you have with your husband, so that the husband isn't a sandwich,
right
between
Myra had said that.
Yeah, and that really clicked with me. It made so much of sense that a young girl is saying something so beautifully. She put that out so beautifully that I just wish that people really get that, but they don't. Now, marriage is an everyday job. This is how I see it. I'm not married, and yet I'm saying this. And because I see it. I see it amongst my colleagues. I see it amongst my friends. I see it amongst my wallpaper, which is my environment. Okay? It's just not two people. It is just not two families. It is just not that, it is another human being that you co-produce together.
Right.
And that human being did not choose to come to you, that soul was just sent, that body was sent, that human being was sent. That's why I say that you're a human being first, then you are somebody's child, then you're whatever relationship. So human dignity and human self-esteem. So that child. So the second part of your question, the answer to that is that I was seeing children suffering, and I'm still seeing children suffering. So this article was written in 2014. The first part of the answer, why did I write it? I live in a rented house, and I live alone. Very unorthodox in Pakistan, being a girl, and that too, I have two brothers, and I have great parents, and I still choose to not live with my parents. Very unorthodox.
Where do you live? Karachi or
Lahore?
Lahore. Okay, got it.
Yeah, the city of the aunties. But
yeah, definitely unorthodox. Yeah,
and Lahore, and the fun part in Lahore is, unlike Karachi is a very productive city. I see that in that way regard, that everybody minds their own business when it comes to work. Their work ethic is phenomenal. Even in Islamabad, I see the literacy rate a little more than that of Lahore, even though it should have been vice versa. And this is statistically, again, proven data that I'm giving to you. Yeah, but in Lahore, the thing is that everybody is just, everyone just knows you. I whether it's through social media, whether it's your, through your parents, or your parents have not met that person for maybe 20 years, and they say, oh, ye itni badi ho gayi hai, and they were like, huh? When the hell did I see you? When was the last time that I saw you? Was I just like a month old?
Right.
Yeah, maybe then. So they have this, they just want to connect with you. They're just so nosy, you can say.
Yeah, because just because you choose not to see certain people doesn't mean they won't talk about you.
Yep, that too. Yeah. Yeah, so my landlady, she was one of the reason why this article one of the reasons. That's a very personal reason. So that was the second reason was what I was seeing in front of me. Right in front of me, with children that I work with, children whose names that I did not even know of. And the first part was very personal. My landlady lives in Germany. Okay.
Oh,
and she's been living there for, I think, 18 to 19 years with her entire family. So when I took this house over, it was like, okay, so there's just this educated lot, right? So you do want to deal with people who are educated, especially if you're renting out their home. And when I first had my meeting with her, she came off as an educated person. And I signed the documents, which we signed for, leasing and renting the house. And everything was perfect. 2 months go by, and she comes over to Pakistan for a vacation. She came from a Pakhtun family. Family background, and a very educated woman. Okay, and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna get my daughter, who's 18, married off to her cousin.
Oh,
and I was like already furious at her, and I was already seeing what was happening on ground with people that I didn't know about. And here's this lady talking, stuff which was just like, oh my God, you're educated. I had nothing more to say to you now. It's like, I think I should vacate the place altogether. but no, when I went in the research, I finally figured out where she was also coming from. Because I understood after doing my research, I was like, okay, I need to put some compassion in here, and I can't just be furious with her all the time. But so here's one thing. The first thing that popped out when I was doing this research was that 24 states out of 52 states in the U.S. have legally banned, cousin
marriages.
Right?
Yes, right.
And
I was aware of that.
Yeah, and what I really love about writing articles, and this one was actually published in their magazine, in the Express Tribune magazine. And what I love about that is that they put it up on the internet, and I love the feedback that I get. So there are lots of people writing comments. So I even got the comments out. I'll discuss that later. So what people basically do is that now us, this generations, the millennials, call them the Y generation. Any I think normally what is understood is that anybody who's born after 1984 falls into the category of a millennial. Yeah. So keeping that in mind, there is so much extra burden in a cousin marriage. Okay, so that is one point. Like there are family feuds. Jaidadi issues, like that kind of thing comes in, and the pressure to make your relationship work, lest the entire khandan reacts. Coming back to the millennial generation, here's this one girl, Shanze. Again, these names have been changed. Shanze Malik, who was 26 years old at that time. She would be 30 now. She said that we see our cousins as brothers and sisters. It is, it's so platonic in nature, the relationship that we have with them, that, just we can't fathom the thought of, being married to them. So yes, that education is within, again, I think the educated class, or maybe the class that is like, okay, we've lived with them for all our lives. Let's try another person out. I don't know,
Right. Makes me wonder why people, we can revisit this question, but on the flip side, why do people marry their cousins, regardless of, I guess, those thoughts of, hey, this person is almost like my brother or sister because we used to play hide and seek together growing up, and
and that's very difficult. I just mentioned one of the guys. He was a 24-year-old guy at that time, and he said now he's 28, and he said that he was coerced into marrying his cousin, and he had 2 kids when he said this to me, that there is so much of burden in my marriage that, I mean, if I have an issue with my wife, I can't address it without her going out and advertising our issue out to the family, and the family making me sit down and making me look like a black sheep. So that thing happens, even though it was a problem, because I always say, this is a saying, बड़ों की saying है कि ताली हमेशा 2 हाथ से बजती है, whether it's a divorce, whether it is a fight, whatever it is. I want to touch the topic of divorce also, by the way. So yes, so I mean, it's always 2 people. It's always a 2-way street. So
very true.
Then just blaming it on one person is just so unhealthy. It's unhealthy for the relationship. It's unhealthy for the families. What happens in the end? Boom, it collapses. Okay, but if it doesn't collapse, then you're miserable and stuck and choked and claustrophobic for the rest of your life, praying that, God, can you lift me up? That's it. Happens. I have seen that happening in front of my eyes, where people have literally come for mental health counseling and said that, why? What do we do? And I'm like, I'm no expert on relationships. Heck, I'm not even married. Okay. But I can be the agony aunt if you want me to be. But stop it. Stop this. Parents need to understand. But then when we came down to the research was basically a rural population. I'm not going to go with the cosmopolitan and the metropolitan cities. This concept of this baradari concept comes in. We are not going to get our children married out of the baradari. So they're afraid of that. And as opposed to searching for suitable spouses elsewhere, they feel that it is more comfortable to get married within their own social circle or their own family at that.
Right.
And parents are actually fearful that their children will acquire bad reputation or get excommunicated in case they marry outside the community. And so they prefer intermarriages. And lots of cases have actually come up in remote areas in Pakistan where people have chosen to get married to their love interests beyond the family scope and beyond the bradaris or whatever you want to call them, and they have been shot in the name of honor.
Yeah, I've seen some articles like that in the past.
Yeah. And this is happening on day-to-day basis.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And it's scary. It is so scary that, how do we address it? So, but then, people would be like, you're getting involved in our personal business, stay out. So this is, it's a very thin line. We really can't say, hey, don't do this. This is wrong.
Right.
We can't, because their mind is open to understanding that. And the worst part about this is that, in addition to what I just said, that excommunication and bad reputation, is that the motives, now look at the word that I'm using, the motives behind these cousinly nuptials are purely monetary in nature. And it is common for one cousin, which is usually the female, to be offered in exchange for money, farmlands, and shelter.
Wow.
And I'm talking about the rural area at the moment. And ironically, as I'm talking about the rural area, now I'm going to hit the stance. Now, this was 4 years ago. I am seeing this happening in our so-called elite class, which has a lot of money. I don't know whether they have the education or not, but they have a lot of money. And they have these extravagant weddings, which last for 3 weeks or so.
Wow.
Oh my God. And they're cousin marriages. And what is coming out of that? What about that?
So the idea is to preserve wealth, essentially.
Preserve wealth within the family. And the female, the bride, is actually used as dowry.
Right. Like an exchange.
As a human shield. It's a human shield thing, So she's being used as, in exchange for money, farmlands, or shelter.
I know this happens, but when you put it like that, it raises my hairs.
Yes.
It's amazing that it's happening every single day.
Every single day, yes. And seeing this, with the people who work at my home, when they have stories to tell me, or actually going on ground and working on a certain different issue, and this thing pops up, and I'm like, oh my God. I would love to even talk about Kandil Baloch here,
Right.
I mean, she went out to work. Yes, she was exploited. Yes, everything happened. Yes, she was bad in her own ways, according to society, judging her the way she was. But she gave, before she died, she gave us something which was so beautiful. She gave us that Malvi, who's behind bars at the moment. Thank God for her. She gave us that guy on live television, and she was shot and killed due to, I don't want to say it, because the next thing I know is that my head is lynched in this country. But God knows, her brother ends up killing her because of that. I don't believe it. I don't believe in that, because she was providing for the family.
That's true. Yeah.
So I cannot believe that the brother would end up killing, and this is a younger brother. The younger brother ended up killing her in the name of honor. Again, in the name of honor. Where is honor? Wow. Where is the honor in killing?
Yeah, very true. They did a drama on Kandil Baloch, like a Pakistani drama on her too. I saw a little bit of it. It was pretty good. I never finished it.
Yes, they did a drama, and there's a book also now that has come out on Kandil Baloch's entire life. I am a part of the Lahore Literary Festival, which takes place in Lahore. We are going in for our 7th edition in February. It happens in London. It just happened in London, actually, last month. And it happens in New York also. So, and it goes under the bandwagon of Lahore Literary Festival, where we take in South Asian literature and also Western literature. Being a literati myself, we have these open debates. We talk. So this Kandil Baloch issue was picked up by one of the authors, and she has actually written an entire book on her life. The same
Wow.
woman whose social media account was blocked and hacked and God knows what while she was alive. And then you come across, writings of Manto, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that he was just born in the wrong era. And I think even if he was born today, it would be a wrong era for a man like him. His stories really pinched people, but they were all reality. And today we are talking about reality. And what is happening to us? We are being lynched for talking the truth,
True.
for speaking the truth. But okay, so now coming back to this cousin marriages thing, I spoke to a certain Dr. Muhammad Aslam Khan, who is the founding head of the Department of Human Genetics at the University of Health Sciences in Lahore. According to him, and according to obviously his research, about 82.5% of parents in Pakistan are blood relatives of first, second, or third generations, or so on. Like we say, first cousin,
Whoa.
second, third cousin. Yeah.
82%?
82.5%.
82.5%. Wow.
Yes. And
Could you reword that? What does that exactly mean though? You're just saying there's some level of mixing, like genetic mixing going on.
No. 82.5%, blood relatives of first, second, and third generation. So maybe like first generation would be like, your aunt's daughter or son, right?
Okay.
Your
right.
khalas, your direct khala.
Oh, your first cousin, your second cousin.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and then the second cousin would be your dad's cousin's, cousin's child, right? And your third generation would be, your dad's cousin's child,
Yeah, right.
So the gene pool actually raises bars. So, and then again, the percentages that he's labeled, that out of these, 6.3% hail from the same extended families or caste, while 6.8% are immediate cousins.
Wow.
Only about 4.4% of couples in Pakistan are married outside of their brethren, which is so shocking.
That is really shocking.
4.4% out of 200 million people? It is beyond my scope of understanding. And then...
Yeah, right.
But then he said, that because I questioned him, I was like, oh my God, I mean, you're talking about 200 million people. So then he answered back saying that no, although these figures are based on a sample size of 9,503 families located primarily in rural Punjab. It is hardly, breaking news that unions between cousins scientifically contiguous marriages are rampant in Pakistan. But here's the thing that this is only in rural Punjab. So God only knows what's happening in rural Sindh, what's happening in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, rural Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We don't know. And Balochistan at that, we don't know that. So that being said, I had another medical student who was in her final year. So she explained it even in more depth, that these cousin marriages increase the expression of autosomal. Okay, this is kind of a medical term, but I'll just make it easy and make it simpler. So it is autosomal recessive disorders, which are leading to infants being at a higher risk of contracting Down syndrome issues and all of that stuff, right? However, in simpler terms, even in more simpler terms, every human being carries a certain genetic, they carry certain genetic mutations, which are recessive, which is basically hidden, but they run the risk of becoming dominant in a smaller gene pool of cousin marriages. So this answers your question. The closer the relationship of the parents to, the family that the child is getting married into, the smaller the gene pool and the greater the risk. So that's that. This is really interesting.
Keep going.
And then she carries on saying that there's a 25% chance that an offspring of a cousin marriage will contract a disease or disorder coming down from one parent. It doesn't have to be both the parents. It can just be one cousin, one cousin who's married. Yeah. And both the doctors cite deafness, blindness, mutism, asthma, Down syndrome, thalassemia, and other skin, heart, kidney, neurodegenerative conditions as consequences of interbreeding between these close relatives. So that's that. And then it's not only, even though this is related to Pakistan, a very interesting study that we found out while we were doing this. It was in between 2007 and 2011. A research was conducted in Bradford, in the United Kingdom, that over 2,000 babies of Pakistani origin, born out of cousin marriages, were at a higher risk of birth defects, with 6 out of 100 babies, only 6, thankfully, 6 out of 100 babies showing one defect or the other, as opposed to a ratio of 3 out of 100 marriages which are not cousin marriages.
So it's almost double the risk.
Yep. I do believe that faith, we are blessed in a way that, I have done comparative religion, and having, read all the scriptures, I do find certain things in our own holy scripture which are very scientifically correct. And I'm just going to relate that, and I'm going to point that out. And I did that today only because I knew that I was going to have this talk with you. So I said that, wait, I need to have some substantial evidence coming from, what is the religious thought process of this all? Is it just us being pseudo-liberals, as we are called? On Twitter, oh my God, we're all pseudo-liberals. Why you guys just don't know anything. You guys are just killing culture. You guys are doing this.
Yeah.
You guys are the dolls. You guys are those, Illuminati.
Social justice warriors.
Yes, you guys are the, Ajuj Majuj. And you're like, huh? Just because you're making sense, So, yeah.
I've been hearing the word liberal a lot now on Pakistani media. ये liberals ने खाना खराब कर दिए सारी चीजों का.
और वो खलका ही मखलूक जो है वो हम हैं.
Right.
So the aliens us, and Jabran Nasir, I don't know if you know Muhammad Jabran Nasir, quite
no, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, he's a 31-year-old lawyer who stood up for the elections independently in 2013 from Karachi, lost magnanimously. Obviously, just a young person at that. But he's a humanitarian and also a lawyer. And Gibran has a major fan following on Twitter. People love him and people hate him.
Huh.
And this guy is somebody not to be messed with, to the point that this time around when we were elections, he again stood up, and religious fundamental groups targeted him in particular because he was provided security, but he did not use it because he's a pseudo-liberal, Not the sarcasm here, okay?
Yeah.
And they were saying कि आपका अकीदा क्या है? And kalma shahadat pade. And he was like, excuse me, this is something that he said this live on television. He's like, you can lynch me, you can mob me, you can stone me, but I am not going to declare my faith to you. This is my personal relationship between me and my God. Who are you? And that is something, again, this is not pseudo-liberalism. This is actually what we've been taught, that even if you're praying, or actually prayer is meditation. So even if you are praying, do it behind closed doors. You don't need to show off. If you're wearing a hijab, good on you. If you're not wearing a hijab, good on you. Maybe you're a better person than the other person. Who am I to judge?
Very true. Yeah.
There's no tolerance, the tolerance aspect of it all. So that's there. One case that did pop up again with cousin marriages. So I think I'm shifting between one thing to the other, here and there, everywhere. There was this one particular girl from Hyderabad who resented the concept this entire concept, saying that my mamu, that being her mom's father, married his first cousin and had a child with Down syndrome. Now, later on, she was married to her own aunt, that meaning her mom's sister, not foster sister, but real sister, her mom's sister's son. And they had a child. She was married to her first cousin, and she had a child who turned out to be deaf and mute.
Oh.
And she's an educated girl. And she added that, I may be wrong, but I believe that these defects are due to the history of intermarriage within my own particular family. And now the family, seeing, what's happening within their family, they are apprehensive. Finally, they're apprehensive of the idea of intermarriage after seeing how problematic it can be. But did it really have to come to that point where you have ruined a being, where you have ruined also those two people who gave birth? When you're giving birth to a child, two people, may they be cousins, whatever, they're two human beings. They have so much of hope. It's a joyful time where, a child is coming into the world. And, this thing comes in, and do you have to learn the hard way always?
Very true, yeah. And Zara, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think my understanding here is that when there's consistent cousin marriages going on within a family, like over generations, so one generation to another, the effect of the genetic pool is worse than just, for example, one person marrying their cousin, but without their parents or their grandparents having married their cousins.
This is true. Now, this is a very rare case that I'm going to talk about. What you're talking about is exactly the gene pool. You're right. So what happens, I totally agree with you, and it's actually statistically proven that the gene pool, the more, if the grandparents are married, their cousins, and they're married, and then their kids are married, and then their kids are married, and it's all these cousins getting married. It's an intermarriage thing going on. The disorders over there are much higher. However, there are certain situations where it doesn't happen at all. All. Okay. So we can't totally negate that, it is only because of cousin marriages that, this child is, going through these Down syndrome issues and whatnot. Right. So one point was that it is a point to note that a physically impaired child isn't always the outcome of every cousin marriage. On the contrary, if a couple itself isn't in the end product of inbreeding, all right, for the last few generations, chances are that one-off cousin marriage will be harmless. In fact, like I just said, many families with frequent cousin marriages have an amazing smooth sailing throughout. And there is another case within my own family and also within a close relative, a friend. Both her grandparents were cousins, and then her parents were first cousins. Okay. And then she was born and she's totally fine. And her entire family is completely fine. And now she's gotten married, and she's gotten married to a cousin too. And she's had a child, and that child is completely fine.
Right.
So birth defects do not, that Bradford study that comes in, that out of, 6 out of 100 babies, out of cousin marriages can be affected, right?
Right.
In regards to the ratio, that 3 out of 100 babies out of the cousin marriage, if they're not cousin marriages, 3 out of 100 babies can be affected too.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make when they're thinking about this subject, which is basically they start thinking not from a risk and probability perspective, but more like analogies like, hey, you're saying cousin marriages are bad, but our neighbor down the street, he married his cousin, his kids are fine. My cousin, my brother, he's married to his cousin, he's fine, their kids are fine too. So they start sharing some examples which validate their opinion, but they forget to look at the big statistical picture, which is just like, hey, we do have this problem.
So I think one must, if there is a genetic issue, it might be well due to some other factor. It cannot just only be, it can be something which is purely coincidental, as opposed to the cousins getting married, parents being cousins. However, I mean, I would say this, and I think a lot of other people who are educated in this field would say that it is always advisable that educate and also be educated. So about the health risks before starting a family, because the entire notion of a marriage, the institution, is to, procreate and then have a family, right. and if, if you can procreate, then now we have these, you can adopt a child, or you can, there's so many other ways whereby you can have a child, but the entire notion of marriage is to have a family. But we need to be aware of the health risks, and the chances of disability often depend on how much interbreeding has occurred in the family. I personally think that we should always have, if there is a potential genetic problem within a family, now we might not know about it. The family might not know they do have a genetic problem, right? So what they can do, if two cousins are getting married, how about before you sign that document that is going to label you for the rest of your life, why don't you just go in and take 2 tests? One is a recommended DNA test, which, gives in a lot of information, and which is basically hemoglobin electrophoresis. Okay. And the chances this particular test can detect chances of thalassemia. And similarly, an overall genetic DNA test can also help greatly. So if you're really, really married to your cousin, okay, no problem. Go ahead, do it. But before you sign those marriage certificate, can you please get yourself checked up? I mean, you're just saving your lives from misery for the rest of your life. How about that?
Yeah, very true.
But this is not available in areas in Pakistan. I wish it was.
And even if it was, the mindset might not. It might take a while before people adopt that mindset that, hey, I got to look at marriage from a medical perspective. Exactly.
Like we were just discussing about honor killings. I mean, that mindset has still not gone. So right now they're exchanging girls, mostly females, for farmlands and shelters for in cousin marriages, so that everything stays within the family. So changing that is like next to impossible. Getting through to them is like no. So they're not receptive or responsive to what we're trying to say. And so we did a global search on this also, not only within Pakistan, that cousin marriages are still going on strong with almost 10%, which is like a huge amount still.
Right.
Out of 7 billion people in this planet, did you only find your cousin? Seriously?
Well, yeah, that's what it goes back to. I always want to understand better why people do it, right? And you already kind of mentioned one, which is the Baradri system in the rural parts.
Yeah.
But I think possibly one other thing, my hypothesis here is it's also just the people you know. And in Pakistan, there's not a lot of trust for people outside of your family.
That's true. Yes. That there's not a lot of trust, and I'll just get, for example, hypothetically speaking, even though I know my parents so well, they would never get me married off within the family. They'd be like, "Nah, not you. You're gonna actually ruin the family instead of नहीं खानदान खराब कर देगी रिश्तेदारियां खराब हो जाएगी."
Yeah, no, it's a valid concern. Yeah, I agree.
No, thanks. Actually hota hai, by the way. People actually go on feuds. They might be very close, sisters, and they end up having their children married, and kaboom, something happens and the sisters are at war with each other for the rest of their life. And those two people, either they would get divorced, which I wanted to mention, that, divorce was a major taboo.
Yeah.
And I would say that divorce was a major taboo back in 2012 or 2013 in Pakistan. I can safely say that, very safely. But now, if you see what's going on in Pakistan, divorce is not a taboo anymore. Every other second person is divorced, and it's okay. And so good to see that positivity. That, you know what? I've seen people who are young and who are divorced, and they have not given up hope. They still want to take the plunge and get married again. They're still looking forward to that. And then there's another kind that who are divorced, and this is something which is so shocking. I did not think that this would ever change, sort of thing. I was really pessimistic about this, but it did. That, we never used to talk about divorce, and now we do.
Yeah.
And we openly talk about it. And whether it's with our elders or whether it is amongst ourselves. But if you're divorced, it's okay. Hell has not fallen on you. Actually, it's maybe a blessing in disguise. So good on you if you're not together. Two people could make sense. Glad that you're out of it. Thank God this mentality has started coming in. Now, the other part is that if you want to get married, so if a divorced man, initially it was easier for a divorced man to get married, again, easily.
Yeah. Right. Not so much the girl, yeah.
No, not so much the girl. Now, however, things are again taking a turnaround on that one. It is becoming equally, if not as equal, but sort of equally easy for the girl who has been divorced to get married again. Because normally they say, oh, isme kuch galti hoegi, iski wajah se divorce hui hai. Right? And now that same thing that I mentioned, that, you can't clap with just one hand, So obviously they started understanding that no, the issue might have been with two people. Sometimes people don't even ask anymore that what happened in your previous marriage due to which this divorce took place. No, we like your daughter. The daughter likes our son and our family. Let's get going.
Right.
And the third category, which I'm so happy about, there are women who have children, okay, and they're divorced. And back in the day, if you're a widow and you have, children, people would just marry you out of pity. At least in Pakistan, it would happen. And now they're marrying widows with children, but they're also marrying women with children and men, and they're single men, by the way, who might not have been married before.
Wow.
And they're willing to take up the responsibility of that child, which is so impressive. And by the way, this is happening in the educated class. So I just hope it seeps into, other places too. Another thing from your earlier marriage podcast that I took up, that, older men prefer younger women and younger women prefer older men. That too is changing. Again, I have examples very much in front of me whereby there's an older lady getting married to a younger guy, and what a phenomenal, exemplary marriage it turns out to be.
Yeah.
So these taboos are being broken. So if, coming back to, cousin marriages, divorces do take place, but that, yes, they don't like the fact that divorce takes place. So I think this Surah Talaq, the chapter of divorce, which is in the scripture, if somebody just reads that and just doesn't go in with the latest upcoming celeb, Maulvi out there on the television, if you just read your book, the way you understand it, you'd be like, oh, God just didn't send that, if anybody believes in God, that knowledge which came 1400 years ago, from wherever it came from, if you guys don't believe in God, to those who don't believe in God, it's just that it's 1400 years ago it came. So if people back then could understand that, then why can't you implement it here? It's 2018. I don't want to sound like Trudeau.
Yeah.
Right. And we're
Yeah.
entering 2019. So, like, for
Yeah.
heaven's sake.
Yeah. I fully agree that we need to get more conversations around divorce to be more acceptable, which wasn't the case like even up till 10, 20 years ago, right? It was fully taboo, and people were spending their entire lives 30, 40, 50 plus years with somebody they were absolutely not compatible with, and they would be really toxic relationships.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, it's just so like you, I kind of see the climb in divorces in America. It was always common, but now I'm seeing it in Pakistani couples too, and so it kind of breaks my heart at the same time, because the entire intention of marriage is to be a lifelong bond.
Yes,
I just wish people would take those a higher emphasis on those preventative measures. Like, more thinking should go into marriage in the first place.
Definitely before signing paper.
Yeah, you'll see families just tying the knot overnight. You'll see couples just saying "huh" out of pressure and not fully thinking about it, and then they regret it because it was a lifelong commitment. They forget that part.
And the sad part of it all is that what we need to understand collectively, we need to understand that we're not only ruining two families, we are ruining that person, that male, the guy, we are ruining the female, and if there is a child in between, we are ruining a child. 3 people.
Yeah.
Families will go away and dissolve, and they'll be like, okay, fine, it's happened, it's gone and over and done and over with. But 3 people have just been, sometimes even 4, number of children involved. People are being they're suffering. Because, like I said, marriage is a beautiful institution if it's only perceived in that way. So yes, marrying a best friend or marrying somebody marrying your cousin, again, coming to cousin marriages. If you feel that it is safer to marry your cousin who is not going to divorce you, okay, go ahead. And if you feel that compatibility with them, go ahead, do it. But then do it on your own behest. Don't do it because of your family. And please get the test done. Just get the test done. And then go ahead and do it. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. If you're compatible, your 2 cousins are compatible, go ahead with it.
Yeah, and you see the risk being relatively low, right? Because nobody can eliminate risk completely, even from regular marriages. There's always risk, right?
Which I've mentioned.
But you can at least minimize it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned we can't predict. It is such an unpredictable thing. 6 out of 100 kids from cousin marriages, 6 babies come out as with disabilities, and but 3 kids out of 100 babies, which are not from cousin marriages, are also coming out with disabilities.
Yeah.
So all we need to do is just be compatible, more understanding, and just get your medical tests. God, how long?
Yeah, get that done. I think people will definitely get your point there. You mentioned religion a little bit. Did you have more to say on that? Were you able to get some information out on what was the religion's intent when it kind of approved cousin marriages as an option? One thing is certain, Islam does allow cousin marriage. It's an absolutely valid choice to make, religiously speaking. However, I wasn't able to find anything in the scripture that would reinforce that Islam actively promotes cousin marriages. Rather, it is neither promoted nor prohibited. Islam really does leave it down to preference. It seems like cousin marriage is another practice which existed in the culture prior to the Prophet's birth in Arabia, like many other practices. It's perhaps possible that Islam, true to its intention of not putting unnecessary restrictions on things that are not harmful to us, allow these types of marriages to continue. And to put things in perspective, there is an added risk of birth defects through cousin marriages, and it's definitely higher than non-cousin marriages. But 1, non-cousin marriages are not exempt from childbirth issues. They have a 3% defect rate as well. And 2, the cousin marriage issue is exacerbated from continuous repetitive marriages within families over generations. So to put it briefly, the problem of childbirth defects in Pakistan is not from just cousin marriages, but from repeated cousin marriages.
Yeah, so first I'm just going to begin with this. We did talk about Pakistan, but it does fall in the same region. Cousin marriages are more prominent in the Gulf states. 70% of marriages cousin marriages are taking place in Gulf states, according to Khalij Times. Okay,
Wow.
This is 2018,
Okay.
so I'm not coming with my research of 2014. I'm talking about the now. And in this now, it's right here in this area, it's happening a lot. Now, coming to the religious part about it all, beautiful. I thought about Prophet Muhammad, peace and salutations on his companions and his family. He was married to his aunt's daughter, Bibi Zainab bint Jash. Right. So he was married to her, but the gene pool, again, we had to look into the history. So I looked a bit to the history. The aunt was, again, a second or third generation aunt, wasn't a direct aunt. However, on the other side, we have Bibi Fatma Radhiyallahu anha, right, his own daughter, who was married to his own cousin, Hazrat Ali, who was Abu Talib's son. But then again, the gene pool was so stretched out because Abu Talib was the Prophet's dad, Abdullah, him, and Abu Talib. The gene pool wasn't really close. It wasn't too close. So there we have it in a religion within itself. We have example right there that the Prophet himself married his cousin, that being Bibi Zainab bint Jash, and Hazrat Fatma and Hazrat Ali. Even though Hazrat Ali was technically an uncle to Bibi Fatma. He was an uncle.
Right.
Yeah. So that was that. Now I will quote the scripture, which is so phenomenal, something that I never knew of. And I wish I had put this in my article. Now, and this is where it comes in, and it is scientifically based. And then I'm going to now quote this verse with Neil deGrasse Tyson and his theory, because I really like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson both.
Me too.
Yeah, great. Okay, so here we go. So in Surah Al-Nisa, verse number 22 and 23, for anybody who's listening out there can verify this. It mentions very clearly that there is no objection whatsoever in Islam, because it is the dominant religion in Pakistan, for a man to marry any of his relatives except the al-mahram, which are those forbidden for marriage. For example, mothers, daughters, sisters, fathers, sisters, mothers, sisters, mothers, brothers, brothers, daughters, sisters, daughters, foster daughters, or whoever has breastfed you. Now, this is written. This is actually written in verse number 22 and verse number 23 in Surah Al-Nisa.
Yeah.
And when you look at it scientifically, again, that gene pool thing, which Neil deGrasse Tyson discussed he linked it up with the tree analogy of the DNA, because we do not come from the apes, and we do not come from the chimpanzees. I don't know if you've seen that episode of his. So, I mean, if you look into that theory, we do not scientifically come from there. We do, however, have the trees. Their DNA corresponds with our DNAs, and the DNA of the stardust, that corresponds again with ours. So when they say that you have a mini universe, the Rumi quotes, which we normally take it as Romeo quotes. My God, please, that man was a spiritual guy.
Right.
That's Romeo. No, that's Rumi. That's not Romeo. He's talking about God.
Rumi, not Romeo.
And God's love.
I didn't know people said that. Yeah. I did not know people called him Romeo.
Yeah.
That's a first.
Yeah, so Rumi is...
The person Zara is referring to, in case you don't know, is Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi. He was a Persian poet and Sufi master who lived in the 13th century. He is actually the best-selling poet in the US, and his poems are highly circulated on social media.
I mean, come on. Every time you have a breakup or a girl wants to send a text to a guy, code's a Rumi code. And you're like, what the hell? Hello? This is like love for God or the source of the universe or whatever that you want to call that highest of all energy powers. And you're quoting Romeo and Juliet. Hey, those the guys even died in the play.
Right. Very true.
So coming to the religious aspect of it all, it's not prohibited as long as, and it is so beautifully explained that do not marry these people, just like I have told you in my scientific research, that don't marry these people, the gene pool, the first cousins, the second cousins, the third cousins, the generations. Don't marry those. And don't marry those who have breastfed you. You can't marry your moms. You can't marry your daughters, sisters, fathers, and all that. And it is written. Now this is there written. And the fun part of it is also in Psalms. I'm forgetting which Psalms it is. It is in Psalms. It is in the Bible. It is in the book of Luke. Okay. And it is in the Torah, which is in the original Bible. So which is the Old Testament is basically the Bible, the supposed word of God. And the New Testament is basically what Jesus did and the companions' recordings of all of that. So my basic question is like, it's all there since centuries and time immemorial. It's there in your religion. It was there 1400 years ago. It was there before that. And why are we still going ahead with it? Because it is convenient? I think it is. Because you can use, I was just reading this on Twitter just before logging on to this. These lavish weddings that we have, a girl walked into her mehndi in a cake. And then people ate that cake. That's the kind of stupidity that's happening. And that was a cousin marriage.
Yeah.
Imagine that. So the money stayed. So the money and the cake and everything stayed in their belly. How convenient. And so, I mentioned my own family, that this is my father's first cousin. Both of them were first cousins. And this is way back in that era. They got married. They were deeply, madly in love. 2 cousins. And first cousins at that. And both of them could not conceive a child.
Right.
And they ended up with a divorce. A year or 2 later, they ended up marrying other people, right? And boom, they had kids from their other marriages, right? So I don't know what. And back in those days, test tubes and IVs and things weren't really
those
there.
were not options.
Those are the options. So here we have it. So yes, it does play a genetic, role play. Plus, what this little girl said, that we see them as brothers and sisters, that we've played with them. How can we now imagine having an intimate relationship with them? It's just disgusting sometimes. But then again, it's not disgusting sometimes. Sometimes it's very mutual and compatible and something that people want. But if you want it, like we are saying, we're not saying don't do it. Go ahead, do it. But before you do it, please take some precautionary measures. You do that in any case if you don't want an accidental child coming in, right? So why don't you take a precautionary measure by just taking 2 tests before getting married to save a generation, to save a human being? And then the feuds that happen, so my khala is my sas also, and my, she's my mother-in-law. So I'm going to have a fight with her, but I can't really fight with her because she's my mother's sister.
Yeah, because I think the advantage that people who don't marry their cousins have is they can start a brand new relationship. Well, it is a brand new relationship with their spouse, with their spouse's family. Whereas with cousin marriages, you already have history. And so you're going to bring up like arguments from when you were back 6 years old. Oh, your mom did this to me, you know. मैं 6 साल की थी, मुझे ये सजा पड़ी, you know, those types of things come up. So
and
that's one.
To laugh on it, but sometimes it can get very grave. That tum choti ho, because when they're raising their children, they go like, "Oh, tum jab choti hoti thi," that's when you used to do the same thing, and now you're repeating that same pattern on the child. You know, so these things happen. Small issues lead to big problems. So I always say this, that there could be one problem, but there are 1,000 solutions. So please, if you want to marry your cousin, even if you're in love with that cousin, let's say they are in love and they're compatible and they do want to genuinely marry because of any family pressure or anything, just take those 2 tests.
Right.
You are going to be saving so much of, damage that God forbid can come on you, you know?
It's unfortunate because I think once people often make up their minds, then doing a test is, first of all, just discouraging. But then they might not even want to know what the results of that test are, possibly, because they've already made a decision. And keep in mind, the change that we're seeing is affecting now the youth of today, but the youth of yesterday have already made their commitments.
That's true.
I'm glad that, the mindset is changing, at least that, we're kind of
progressing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the last thing that I wanted to potentially discuss more on the religious aspect again is the Bradari system that you mentioned and honor killings. We talked about that earlier. Now, I'm not a religious expert by any means, but I've studied the religion just, a little bit over the years, of course. And this is one thing. Now, Islam gets a lot of heat for other controversial things like blasphemy laws, or it's kind of in the scripture, you can trace it back. But the interesting thing about this, the honor killings, is there's nothing that is traceable back to our religion in terms of anything the prophet did or anything God said in the Quran. Honor killings, baradari, it seems to be kind of an ancient law set up on our land, and it kind of never went away, even with Islamic rule.
Very true. To the point that, in Islam, again, we are told to keep marriages very simple. And I love the Christian tradition, at least, that, they go for they go to the church, get married, get their prenuptials, and out they go partying with their friends, and that's it. Boom, finish. Right? Okay, great. Now, what we've done is that we need to also understand the geographical part of where we are. We have, you just mentioned the Baradari system and the honor killing system. It is not in Islam. It is not in the scripture. It is not there. However, it is, like you said, very rightly so, it is dating back eons and eons and eons, way back when the partition never took place, Okay.
Yeah, of course.
So, and the biggest example that I can give to you right now is, again, marriage. Is when you see these mayos, these mendis, these three week weddings where you're like exhausted buying those expensive clothes, and you're like, what am I doing with these monsoon weddings? If you've seen Monsoon Wedding, the movie, and I mean, what are we doing here? Whereas we are supposed to, our religion teaches, go to the mosque or wherever, get your, pretty much like in Christianity, get your prenuptial sign, and actually we, in our nikah nama, with something which I'm working with Sharmeen about at the moment, that we need to start working and educating people on the nikah nama in itself. There are clauses that women don't even read. My God. So please stop doing that and read the English part if you can read, or read the Urdu part, whichever language resonates.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
Do that. And so these traditions of, these mehndi and all of that, that's not our culture. That is not our culture at all. That is not who we are. That is not what, our Islam teaches. Islam is teaching something very simple. It's saying that go ahead, get yourself married off and go for the rukhsati. After that, the following day, you need to declare to people around you, to your relatives, to your extended relatives, or to your friends, or to people who know you, or to people by and large, that you two are a married couple. And the reason for that is that it prevents adultery. Yeah, so it prevents adultery. That's the only reason. There's no other reason. And then you distribute food basically out of goodwill. That is it. That which is called the walima, right?
Yeah,
and yeah, so we're not supposed to do all of this. I fail to understand why we go ahead and, well, maybe it's just they just want to have fun. Great on that. But you know what? The poor people are looking at us. This is where it hurts me. This is where it really, hurts me when I am there, on ground. I'm not talking about what I'm hearing. I'm talking about what I'm seeing. When I'm there, they go extravagant because they've seen something like right now, Deepika Padukone and Ranveer Singh got married.
Oh, yeah.
And then Nick Youngka, Nick Jonas and Priyanka Chopra got married. My God. Okay, so they can afford it, right?
Yeah, one of them had a 20-foot tall cake. I forgot which one. 20-foot tall cake.
Exactly.
That's higher than 2 ceilings. That's higher than 2 floors. That's crazy.
And I was looking at that and I was wondering how many poor people could be fed.
Yeah.
And my mother thought that I've lost my marbles. Hey, don't you ever want to get married, Zara? And I'm like, I do, but Mom, you look at the cake. And she's like,
yeah,
I've lost all my hope with you ever getting married.
So I just wanted to quickly summarize some of the reasons to marry your cousins and not to marry your cousins based on my discussion with Zara, a lot of them pointed out by her. Reasons to marry your cousin or consider marrying your cousin. A, you actually like your cousin, of course. And B, cousin marriages are not very common in your family, and like Zara said, you have consulted a doctor. Reasons not to marry your cousin. A, genetics, which is obvious. If your family has multiple generations of repeated cousin marriages, avoid that. B, family pressure. You should not be forced to call someone you've always thought as your sibling as your spouse just because of family pressure. And C, the most underrated reason to not marry in the family, which is family feuds, because of the possible feuds that can arise between two people who tie a knot within the same family. And then, of course, beyond these reasons to marry and reasons not to marry with your cousins, there's other reasons that seem like they are good, but in fact are terrible reasons to marry anyone. And one of those is, for example, preserving wealth. Marriages are not business transactions. So that's never a good reason to marry within the family.
All right, take care of yourself.
Okay, take care.
Lovely talking to you. Regards to your wife and your family.
Yeah, thank you. You too, your family as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, Allah Hafiz.